Our last story today deals with a $1 billion bid from Binance.us to buy Voyager Digital's assets out of bankruptcy, and the judge says that it should go ahead. In a Wednesday court filing that I'll describe as oddly satisfying to at least this longtime industry observer. In lengthy written comments, the judge recounted how the U.S. securities regulator is essentially trying to have its cake and eat it too, by on the one hand arguing that Voyager token might be a security and that Binance US might be an unregistered securities exchange, but on the other hand emphasizing repeatedly that this was just potentially the opinion of SEC staff and that the commission wasn't going to comment at all, provide any arguments or any evidence in support of any of that. So the SEC wanted the bankruptcy deal not to go forward because of these kind of hand-wavy allegations that they had floated and then declined to provide anything. And happily, the judge recognized that the securities regulator essentially was asking for an impossible standard and politely declined to respect that as a reason not to go forward with the deal. So that's the story. And if one wants to assume good faith on the part of the SEC, I think the question really is, what were they thinking? I mean, like, what could possibly have been the argument for this type of approach in this situation? Jen?
Doesn't this just fit with how the SEC operates? Like, can you blame them? This works for them in so many other facets of their business. They go in, they say something, we think this, we don't want to give that much information, and it just works. I really tip my hat to this judge for, sticking to how the proceedings should work, sticking to the court's rulings and not allowing this case to be kind of pushed into a corner or bullied by the regulators. Adam, I think that this comes back to that ulterior motive narrative that you were talking about earlier, right? Like, what is the actual intent of the regulators who are trying to interject into this case? Are they actually looking out for retail at the end of the day, or are they looking out for themselves and their own motives? I want to touch on a point that came up previously on the show. We've been uncovering this story. Well, we've been talking about this story almost every day now. The judge previously said if the DOJ or any government agency had evidence of misconduct specifically related to the bankruptcy, they should have presented it in court. And I think that just makes sense, right? The government can't just come in at any point during the process and say, we're the government, we want this to happen. There are processes in place and they are very clear. And so I'm happy that this happened this way. Will, what do you think?
No, I definitely agree with you. I feel like there's been a lot of time for them to do something about this. I mean, we've had two different buyers for this Chapter 11 case, both FTX and now Binance US, and then still these government agencies have not been able to move forward with anything substantive, right? We've had the DOJ, we've had the SEC, and now this judge is coming through and saying, hey, no, like the bettors here, every day that they don't have the ability to sell any of their tokens that are locked up in Voyager, they are harmed by this. And so I, again, also applaud the judge, just like you said. And I think this is like a silver lining of the way that crypto can grow in the United States, right? There are different governments bodies, and those government bodies work against each other. There's a lot of friction there. And so I think a lot of people in crypto right now are looking at the judicial branch and saying, if these guys might actually help us out, while the administrative bodies in the executive office have been antagonists towards crypto. Everyone in the administration or even in the Trump administration were very against crypto in some of their rulings. But I think some of these judges, they're looking at more of the precedent and they're looking for things to be done according to rule of law and precedent done in law. And they might be pro-crypto, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. Zach, to you.
A win for due process either way. It is interesting to see this unfold. And I think, Will, you mentioned something interesting, right? If the executive branch is going to be aggressively pursuing these things, sometimes with fairly flimsy footing, I think the crypto industry is rightly saying we need to focus our efforts on the judicial, but really mostly on the legislative end of things, right? Where they can get the ear of some of these lawmakers and say, okay, here's, again, the reason why crypto should exist in the US. Here's what crypto can provide to US consumers that is better than the existing financial system, while also protecting against some of the shortcomings and some of the outright fraud and scam that we've seen in the space over the last few years, right? So I think in terms of sort of like, policy-making calculus, it seems as though most people in the crypto space are really focusing their efforts on the legislative side of things, where they can talk to federal lawmakers and hopefully advance common sense policy in that context. Interesting to see for sure.